Veterinarian. For most of us, that's not a word we associate with modern food production. In fact, if you don't have a pet, you might not think about veterinarians much at all. The truth, however, is that veterinarians are an integral part of modern livestock production. This isn't just late night emergency calls, but rather vets are active partners with producers in managing health, reproduction, nutrition, and welfare. My guest today is Dr. Kelly Barratt, a vet and partner in Heartland Vet Services in Listowel, Ontario. She is a large animal veterinarian with a primary focus on dairy cattle. My name is Mike Von Massow, and this is the Food Focus Podcast. In this episode, I talked to Kelly about what a dairy vet does and her partnership with producers. She highlights that while there are still nighttime calls, she now visits her clients every 2 weeks to work on prevention and proactive herd management. We talk about her path to becoming a veterinarian. In the past generation, there has been a significant shift towards female veterinarians, and vet practices have taken steps like growing through consolidation to provide better work-life balance and allow time and space for families. In fact, if you're watching this on YouTube, you will see Kelly's new baby on her lap while we're recording this episode. Vets play a role beyond the farm too. They are active in food safety through meat inspection, and Kelly also works with Dairy Farmers of Ontario on milk quality initiatives. We close the episode with a discussion of one of Kelly's priorities, mental health in agriculture. Farming can be a solitary endeavor, and vets are a primary point of interaction and can be important in identifying and helping mental health issues. I am sure you'll find this conversation interesting. Well, hello, Kelly. Thanks for taking the time. It looks like it's a busy time, and I appreciate you joining me today.
Yeah, no problem. This is me and Archie. He's almost 3 months old, and I don't go very far without him these days.
Yeah, I appreciate that. That's an exciting time in your life, and it's your second one, if I recall, right?
Yep, that's right. My first is Noah. He is 2.5 years old, and he is farming with his dad today. I told them they
Oh,
had to
good.
stay out and keep it quiet, but we'll see what we can do.
Good. One of the reasons I wanted to chat with you today is I think that people generally don't have an understanding of the complexities of modern agricultural production, modern food production, and really don't have a sense of where their food comes from. And and many people have this sort of romantic idea of the solitary farmer, which in some regards is true, but don't have an understanding of the depth and breadth of the team that supports the modern farmer. And so I thought I'd take a chance, take an opportunity to chat with you, who is a veterinarian, and get a sense of what you do on a day-to-day basis when you're not home with a
Yeah.
newborn. What what do you see your role as a veterinarian as?
I see well, first of all, thanks for inviting me. I'm happy to do this. I do have a little bit more time on my hands, although it's not as free time as I might be used to having.
Yeah.
I would describe my role as a food animal veterinarian, and I mostly do dairy practice as a team player or even as a coach for producers in respect to animal health. I think farmers are well versed in taking care of animals. That is their livelihood. It's what they do day in and day out, and they love their animals very much, as far as what their job is. And my role is to help them to optimize the care that is given to their animals. And when I say care, I mean everything from diseases and emergency situations like calvings and cows that aren't feeling well off feed, but also in the broader scheme of things when it comes to prevention of disease. So implementing protocols to prevent disease, whether that be from a nutritional standpoint, whether that be from a animal welfare standpoint, or even just reproduction is a huge part of dairy farming. And so making sure that all of the animals are meeting their goals and to be optimal for health and production for the farmer.
Many of us have, I have, we have pets here, not cows, but we have pets here, and sort of do our annual visit for vaccines and those sorts of things, and then go see the vet if we have an issue with one of the dogs. Your relationship with a dairy farmer is really fundamentally different than most people will have with their veterinarian as a pet. You're going there regularly as you said, a proactive coach or advisor in the management of that herd.
Yeah, absolutely. Most of my clients, I'm arriving at their farm for a herd health check every 2 weeks. So, we talk about it. I see my clients more than I see my friends, right? Like, I think that's something that is maybe not understood by the general population. Is we really become um, closer than just the normal vet client patient relationship, I would say. And that's one of the reasons why I love my job as much as I do is I get to develop those relationships, the ongoing conversations, and I get to follow things very closely, whether that be the data on the farm, the progress of individual animals, or even just the progress of the family in general, right? Like, getting to know the ins and outs of the children's schedules and what's going on. So yeah, my role and my relationship with my clients is very close.
Yeah, and that really, that's an important. It's important to have that relationship, not only so that you can have challenging conversations if challenging
Yes.
conversations are required, but also to build that trust, because farmers have a lot invested in their operations, and they need to trust the advice that you give them and the perspectives that they give them and the recommendations that you make in order for you to be able to make a real difference on that farm.
Yeah, I mean, these are multi-million dollar operations in most cases, right? Even the smallest of family farms have an incredible amount invested, not just financially, but emotionally and generationally, because I think that's something. It was actually just I was reminded of it just recently. We unfortunately lost one of my colleagues, Dr. Dave Hunsberger, suddenly to an illness after 40 years of practice. And I was reminded of just how important our relationships are by those clients when we were talking about his passing. And, a lot of those clients, he had been the herd veterinarian for 4 generations of farmers. And
Wow.
and that speaks volumes to me of the level of trust and the loyalty and the commitment that he had to those farms and that those farmers had to him. And it's why we do it, and it is so the emotional paycheck. As much as I'm invested in the financial paycheck of the farmer, right? My goal is for him to be successful, him or her to be successful. The emotional paycheck is by far more valuable to me.
Yeah, just and as I was telling you before we started to record, I've done some ride-alongs with dairy vets, and I was always struck by uh, when you show up on a herd health visit, the first thing isn't how's this cow or how's this cow. It's how's the family, how's this son who or daughter who's off at university, or I remember someone wasn't feeling well last time. Is everything good? It is really that fundamentally different than I have with my veterinarian when I take my dogs in.
Yeah, yeah,
So it's interesting. I was looking you up before we chatted, and you actually live on a dairy farm as well, right?
I do, I do.
And does that change your perspective, or has it,
Oh yes.
or really change your perspective relative to your veterinary practice?
Yeah, yeah, it does. So I did not grow up on a farm, right? I'm a town kid from Tara, and didn't have a ton of exposure to dairy farms in general until I became a teenager and started riding around with a local veterinarian, and then was, enamored with it. Right, these cows, you can pet them, and it's wonderful, and they always have hot water in the barn, and so it was a great, and it really pushed me in that direction. And then, to come full circle, now living on a dairy farm, being immersed in it day to day, I have a whole, I mean, I was always had very high level of respect for what it took to be a dairy farmer, and now I know that I don't have the capabilities, diverse capabilities that these dairy farmers have. They truly are amazing, and it also gives me, I think a different level of empathy towards them. I think, the I know now how much it means when you check in. I think the relationships, and keeping that finger on the pulse of what's happening for each individual and understanding their individual circumstances has really strengthened my relationships with my clients.
Yeah, it's interesting because that's exactly what I expected. Is you have a better sense of some of the things that can go wrong on a day to day basis, or
Yeah.
that can drive people nuts. The little bumps in the road.
Yeah, big storm last night. The power was out, and it's kind of funny that I was still at home. I hadn't headed to the barn yet for milking, and I'm hiding in the basement with this big storm coming through. The power goes out, and I'm not from a farm, so my mom sends me this Snapchat, because my mom is on Snapchat. She sends me a message:
Yeah,
Is Adam going to have to milk the cows by hand?" And I just laughed, right? Like, no, we definitely don't have to milk the cows by hand. And boy, am I ever grateful for those types of things, right? I
yeah.
think it's, yeah, like, just amazing.
Yeah. So and those things that people really don't think about, like a backup generator for when
Mm,
the power goes out, that kicks in and allows you not only to run the operation and milk the cows, but to ensure from a food safety perspective that the milk that is already in the tank before it gets picked up stays cold and maintains the cold chain, and all of those. I thought I would switch gears before, just for a minute, because I know that you also have a role with Dairy Farmers of Ontario as a milk quality analyst, or I'm not sure if I'm getting
yep.
the terminology correct. Uh, and again, another role that people may not think about in the context of a veterinarian.
Yeah, veterinarians, especially food animal veterinarians, are heavily involved in food safety, right? Making sure that the products that are used on farm, so in particular medications, are used appropriately, and that they appropriate withdrawal times are followed, and so on. And in Canada, we're fortunate to have a national quality assurance program that encompasses food safety and milk quality. And so my role with Dairy Farmers of Ontario is to be a liaison between the industry, so Dairy Farmers of Ontario, and veterinarians, because we recognize that the role of the veterinarian on dairy farms is very important, and we have that regular contact, and we can then pass on information and assist the farmers in meeting the requirements of those programs, whether it be food safety, animal care, biosecurity. There's a variety of things included, but in particular, milk quality, right? I think that's there's a lot of effort and a lot of information goes into making sure that the milk that leaves each farm is nutritious and safe and comes from healthy cows.
Yeah. And I think it's interesting because many people will have no idea of the degree of regulation and
Mm,
guidelines that producers have to meet. That this isn't just, pardon, the Wild West. There are not only our farmers have a strong vested interest in doing things the right way, but there are explicit standards on, as you said, animal care, and food safety and other things that they're held to account for.
absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. It's very extensive. And that's another thing that I have a whole new appreciation for living on the farm is, the amount of time and effort it takes to keep up with those standards, and how closely it's monitored. Thank goodness, in some respects, for our cell phones and easy access to technology to be updated on that information multiple times a day.
Yeah, again, people have no idea that a farmer can be almost anywhere and be getting updates on their phone to make sure everything is still within the acceptable limits on the cold chain, the bulk tank, and all of those sorts of things.
Yeah, yeah.
So let's take a step back and sort of ask you a couple of more questions related directly to Kelly. You didn't grow up on a farm. How did you decide to become a veterinarian generally, and then choose large animal practice specifically? Because we know that one of the challenges we have in rural Canada, and I would say across North America and then probably in other countries as well, is finding people to be large animal veterinarians. How did you get there?
The beginning of the story is not surprising. I wanted to be a vet since I was in kindergarten.
Yeah.
That was it. I had a little cat, and that was great. And then, of course, when I turned 9, I got my first horse, and so then I was a horse girl, and I worked for a. I did a co-op in high school with a horse vet, and that was where I wanted to go. But like many people, getting into vet school is really hard.
Yep.
You have to have really high marks, but you also have to demonstrate a knowledge and a desire to be a part of the industry. And so I applied for a job on a dairy farm. And luckily enough, I got the job, and I actually moved in with the family and milked cows and learned how to drive a tractor for the summer. Um, it was a wonderful experience. I learned a lot, and I knew at that moment that I wanted to be around dairy cows. And I think that did help me get into vet school. And once in vet school, I continued that by working for various professors in the Department of Pop Med, Dave Kelton, Ken Leslie. And it just grew from there. And it really does come full circle. I am now the herd veterinarian for that dairy farm that took a chance on some town kid to move in with them and milk cows. And so it truly has been a wonderful journey and experience. And you're absolutely right. I mean, we go through cycles of times when veterinarians can't find a job, and times when it's hard to find veterinarians. And right now we are desperate to find large animal veterinarians, small animal veterinarians too, but in particular, large animal veterinarians.
Yeah. So that's a cool story, and it's interesting because I ended up in agriculture, not coming from a farm as well. So I'm always keen to hear those stories. I remember I went to Guelph quite a bit of time before you did, Kelly, and so I remember when I was young watching those BBC James Herriot TV shows, and that sort of antiquated vision of what a veterinarian does. And you saw people frequently, and when I worked in the industry too, vets working weekends, on call, in small practices every weekend or every second weekend. Difficult to have a family, and we see you there with with your baby and managing it. And I looked at Heartland's at the team page at your clinic's website, and there are far more women in practice than there were several generations ago, and even a generation ago in large animal practice. What are some of the things that veterinarians and clinics are doing to make it still a hard job, but to make it easier to attract people to the profession?
There's so much stuff I want to touch on with that, because it's something I am really passionate about. As an owner of one of the owners of Heartland, when I started there, I was the only female large animal veterinarian. I wasn't the first. Thank goodness for those women who paved the way for me. but a lot has changed in 16 and a half years in practice. Now we're mostly women, and as much as you know James Harriet had a role to play. I'm not going to lie about me wanting to become a veterinarian, right? Those stories, and it is
Yeah.
wonderful, and it probably helped me become a food animal veterinarian in the end, because it's those relationships that I really enjoy. But being a part of a large practice, I think, was extremely important to me from a work life balance standpoint. I wanted to be in a group that, being on call every third weekend is okay if there's not that many calls. But if you look after a lot of animals, and in our practice, we're approaching 20,000 dairy cows that we care for, you need a lot of people to cover the geographic area and to cover the number of calls. So you don't want to be on call for a whole week straight. That would be very detrimental, I think, to your mental health and also to your family life. So I think that that's a big thing, is putting a real emphasis on that and making a true effort to prioritize people's families and priorities within your schedule. And so ever since I had my first child, I went back at 4 days a week. Boy, I think you'd be hard pressed to find me ever go back to 5 days a week now, knowing what it's like to work 4 days a week. And I think that the idea that you have to work yourself to the ground is disappearing. Certainly, when I started, it's what I wanted to do. It was a rite of passage in a way, and I don't think that's a good um, image that we want to portray in veterinary medicine if we want people to stay in practice, right? We want it to be, yes, it's a hard job, and the James Harriet stuff never goes away. You still get to go out and see, very sweet things and endearing stories about certain animals. But the focus should be on prevention and be able to accomplish the majority of your work during the workday.
Yeah. Yeah. So that there are fewer emergencies.
Yeah.
And it's interesting to hear, talking about, working 4 days a week, but that means that you work longer, that you'll have both the energy, and it's a very physical job too. I talked to veterinarians and shoulders and other body parts that get sore, and if you manage that with spreading the emergency workload across a big practice, maybe working a little bit less intensely, your career can be longer.
Yeah, and I will say that as the students come along and new veterinarians come along and more women come into practice, and it's so hard to say this without sounding like I'm being offensive of men in practice, but we do have to work a little bit smarter than harder. I have some colleagues and coworkers that are so much stronger than me. I mean, but yet they still can't manhandle a 1,800-pound cow, right? The
Yeah.
reality is that, yeah, strength is wonderful. Height and arm length are all wonderful factors in your success sometimes, but in a way, being a smaller person and maybe not quite as much sheer power in those shoulders makes you realize that, you know what, I don't need to do that. There's another way, and hopefully that will help the longevity of those people in large animal practice.
Yeah. And demonstrating that you can have a family and
Mm.
enjoy life as a veterinarian and enjoy life beyond being a veterinarian, I think, is an important example for people coming into the industry.
Yeah, and I'll admit, I kind of came into the motherhood game a little bit later. I achieved a lot of the things in my career um, that I had set my mind to, and I think the passion for doing that had a lot to play. That having a family didn't seem like it was a good option in my younger years. And life happens, and things change, and now it's a priority for me, and it is possible. And I love to interact with students and just be like, look, you can do this. Yeah, it's hard. It's really hard, but at
Yeah.
the same time, it's really rewarding, and it doesn't have to stall your career. I think that that's a big fear. You've invested the money and the time to get your vet degree. maybe you don't want to take the time off for a maternity leave, but the clients are very understanding. When you look around, a lot of them are parents as well, and they've been nothing but supportive. It's been wonderful.
Yeah, it's interesting. My wife is a dentist, and went into a partnership, went into a practice, and wrestled with many of the same things, and got established. And then we decided to have a family, and managed all of those similar issues in a small town that you're talking about. And I think we've come a long way in opening our eyes and saying, yeah, we can do this, and striking the appropriate balance. Although sometimes I'd argue she works a little too hard, striking that right balance. And I think it's been good. And as you say, uh, you probably bring a slightly different perspective to veterinary practice than many men would, and having both within a larger practice is probably invaluable.
Yeah.
So I've taken about as much of your time as I promised. I want to just cover one last topic, because I think it's one that's important to you. You and I were on a panel last fall about sort of COVID and farming, and uh, one of the things that I remember us talking about is uh, the importance of checking in, of people.
Mm.
uh, you know the last 18 months have been stressful for all of us. It's probably been least disruptive in many dairy farms. I talked to
Yeah.
one dairy farmer, and she told me that we've been socially distancing for 40 years. But I think the role of the veterinarian also in that relationship is sometimes being that person who sees these producers on a regular basis, and has a sense of how people are doing and checking in. Uh, is that something you see as a role for yourself as a veterinarian as well?
Absolutely. You're right. I am very passionate about this particular topic. I think it's um, finally coming to the surface of ending the stigma surrounding mental health, or mental illness, and focusing on mental health. And I think um, when it comes to farmers, you're right. Veterinarians um, are key players in that, as first responders, so to speak, in that we see those people on a regular basis, and so we can identify when things start to change, or things are different around the farm, or with that person. We have close relationships. We've got that level of trust that we can have difficult conversations, and they are extremely difficult, but they are always rewarding. You can never really go wrong in checking in with someone. And I think that even once something is identified, having that ongoing relationship, and I'm the first to share with my clients that veterinarians struggle with this stuff too, and they're not alone. And we've been through some stuff at the vet clinic. I've been through some stuff in my own personal life, and I think it can make us all very relatable. And I think that's important, because veterinarians are generally highly respected and as advisors and coaches, to their clients and within their community. And we genuinely, our goal is to help producers be successful, and the only way they can do that is if they are healthy. And so it's not just about the health of the farm, or of the animals and the farm, but also the farmer. And we genuinely do um, care and notice these things, and yeah, just it puts us in a position to be in the right place at the right time.
Yeah, exactly. And I think it's an important lesson for all of us, at any time, but especially in these stressful times, is just to check in. If you
Yeah.
notice something's different, just ask, how are you doing? Like you say, it can be awkward, it can be difficult, but it can be so important, and it can be so impactful that it really is worth taking that chance.
Yeah, it shows people how much you care, right? You wouldn't ask, "Hey, how you doing?" Or, like, I've noticed some things are different. Are you doing okay? If you didn't care, right? So one, you noticed, and two, you're going to take time out of your day to have a conversation. It goes a long way.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just so important. I can't even. I could talk about that all day long. Yeah.
Well, I promised you I wouldn't take too long,
No, that's right.
but I appreciate. To me personally, it's a profoundly important issue as well, and I think I wanted to highlight it because it's really an important role that a veterinarian can play. That in these times where people have fewer people that they interact with, it's more important that those interactions become not only positive interactions, but insightful ones to say, is everything okay? But we should
Yeah.
be doing that in our broader social and work circles anyway, just checking in
Yeah.
with people.
Yeah, and I think if I can, one more thing about it,
Oh
like
yeah,
I
no,
said, I could
please,
talk about
please.
it. I want to put in a plug for continuing education. I mean, I think that's something veterinarians are super familiar with, and producers too. They're always learning more, whether that be from magazines or from attending courses. But something I think we shy away from is in our own personal development. There's if you feel uncomfortable or really awkward about these types of conversations, or you don't know how to help, the Canadian Mental Health Association has put together mental health first aid for farmers. And so, between Andrea Bitten Jones, the Do More Ag Foundation, there's so many avenues to access courses and education materials to make you more comfortable in having those conversations. And I strongly encourage farmers to take it, as well as veterinarians or anyone who is uh, working closely with producers in
Yeah.
agriculture, because they're going to pick up tips and tricks that can really go a long way.
Yep. Help you identify when someone might be struggling, and help you identify, or help you ask questions in a way that people will feel like they can engage. I couldn't agree more. And again, I would highlight that that's important whether you're working with producers or students like I do,
Yes.
or whatever. Uh, those sorts of training programs can be so valuable in finding ways to help people who are struggling. So I appreciate you taking the time to doing that. I always give at the end of at the end of a conversation an opportunity to say, is there something else that you want to add? Is there a question that you thought I might ask that I didn't, or is there a point you want to make before I let you go?
No, I think we covered the high points of the things that I am most passionate about. And yeah, it was really nice talking with you, Mike.
Yeah, good. Kelly, thank you so much for taking the time. And I know it's a busy time, it's a different time. And I really appreciate it. And be well, be safe, and looking forward to chatting again soon. That wraps up another episode of the Food Focus podcast. We very much appreciate you taking the time to listen. If you just discovered Food Focus, you can subscribe anywhere you get podcasts. If you enjoy the podcast, please give us a review. It helps others find us. Before we go, I want to thank my producer, Zach, for his hard work in making each episode sound good, and for his original music that helps us transition. He does the hard work, and we get to have all of the fun. Thanks. Have a great day.